If US President Donald Trump's arrival at the Asia-Pacific Economic Summit revived any hope for the Trans-Pacific Free Trade Deal, his speech crushed it once and for all.
I will make bilateral trade agreements with any Indo-Pacific nation that wants to be our partner and that will abide by the principles of fair and reciprocal trade. What we will no longer do is enter into large agreements that tie our hands, surrender our sovereignty, and make meaningful enforcement practically impossible.
While the so-called leader of the free world steps away from globalization, Chinese President Xi Jinping wants to be its new torchbearer.
In the face of deep changes in the global economy, does the Asia-Pacific region have the bravery to face the wave of reform and innovation, or to hesitate? Should we steer economic globalization? Should we jointly advance regional cooperation, or should we go our separate ways? China's steps towards openness won't stop. We will work with other countries to push forward the construction of the Belt and Road Initiative and increase motivation for joint development. We will liberalize trade and investment.
And putting substance to Xi's speech, Beijing is easing restrictions on foreign investments into Chinese companies.
China will raise the investment proportion limit for one or more foreign investors' direct or indirect investments in joint venture firms involved in the securities, fund management and futures businesses to 51%. In other words, foreign capital can own more than 50% of a joint venture company.
Besides letting in foreign companies, China is also stepping up to help revive other economies like the US. Oil major Sinopec, Bank of China, and the China Investment Corporation have agreed to develop Alaska's gas fields. They'll invest $43 billion in the sector, and just the construction of these projects could create as many as 12,000 jobs. And US plane manufacturer Boeing has flown off with orders for 300 aircraft worth $37 billion from Chinese buyers. While these deals have sweetened Trump's tone on China, Beijing still needs to win over European support to achieve its vision of a new Silk Road. For that, trade deals might not be enough. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Let's go into this further now. Our editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, is in Paris. But first, let's speak to Professor Wang. She's a professor of Chinese business and trade at Warwick University. Great to have you both on the show. Professor Qing, welcome to Money Talks. Professor Wang, at the end of last year, the US trade deficit with China was $347 billion. How do you see that changing over the coming years as this relationship between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping evolves?
Well, yeah, so as you said, it's over 300 billion trade deficit between the US and China. And this one trip that President Donald Trump made to China has pretty much made that up with 250 billion already in the pocket, or at least the likelihood of will that be addressed significantly. But I think this is only a starting point because it's more symbolic to show that there's so much room for collaboration rather than confrontation, and if that's what the US is willing to do with China.
What is your assessment of this move to liberalize the financial sector, China's financial sector? I mean, on the surface, it appears to be a significant shift in economic policy, but China very rarely gives anything away for free. What is the long-term quid pro quo here?
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand where the Chinese new, central government leadership vision are, that the Belt and Road Initiative pretty much laid out the sort of the ambition that it has, which is to globalize, and it also very keenly aware of perhaps the most the biggest problem in that move to more global economy is its financial system, which is probably the least reformed, the least open in otherwise very flamboyant Chinese economy, and it has been kept back for long enough. And the Chinese government now has a new confidence in its leadership and also in its economy, which is growing very well. So therefore, it's time for them to tackle the more difficult problems. And what is the better time to do it than just after the 19th Congress?
Interesting. I'm going to come back to that question of the Congress in a second. But Craig, I want to turn to you for a second, if I may. What are foreign investors saying about this move to liberalize the financial sector?
Well, the money baggers I spoke to on Wall Street today are saying this sounds a lot like politics and not predictability. What they're concerned about, one of the many things they're concerned about and the administration is concerned about, is China holds over $1.24 trillion of U.S. paper debt. A lot of this crowd is saying too little, too late. One of the things that was cited to me today was the Visa and MasterCard, which just were allowed to go into China. They were then blocked from operating a wholly owned foreign entity in the country to collect the money. It's the little things. The devil is in the details, as Ross Perot said. However, they did cite some good news. What they found is, well, what investments or opportunities are going to be there for foreign companies beyond financial services and beyond, like, Boeing and building pipelines? Well, they believe that Communist Party Chairman Xi today gave that away when he started talking about pursuing green ecological development by 2035. So the money people I talk to are now looking around to see what type of green companies might be able to go in and get into some of these 51% deals that Chinese Communist Party Chairman Xi is talking about. So that's the opportunity. Overall, too little, too late.
Right, interesting. Craig, I want to get your take on this evolving relationship between Trump and Xi Jinping. Trump standing his ground there, saying that China doesn't play fair on trade. He's said this many times, of course, but then conceding that actually he doesn't blame China for doing so. Have we seen such an approach from any other U.S. president when it comes to trade, especially with China?
No, but remember, Donald Trump is a failed casino owner and former game show host on television. This is how he operates. I think it's really hard for me to go beyond that kind of fact, because you really then go down into the weeds. But you do not hear U.S. presidents going abroad and criticizing the presidents who were there before them. This has never been done, regardless of the party. Now, face it, the reality on the street is this: China controls the playing field right now. The U.S. might, for the moment, be the biggest economy in the world, but a lot of people are saying that's not going to continue. Yeah. So Chairman Xi is holding all the cards right now.
Right. Professor Wang, I would like to turn back to you, if I may. This move to liberalize the financial sector comes shortly after the 19th Communist Party Congress, in which Xi Jinping cemented his power on China. Do you think such a move would have been politically more dangerous for him if he had done so before this Congress?
Well, we need to understand President Xi's background and his personality and his character. He's not going to shy away from difficult problems. As I said earlier, this is the best time for him to tackle it. And he knows how debilitating if it didn't solve the problem in the financial sector. You have to remember the governor of Bank of China, Xiao Chuanzhou, once commented on the laziness of the Chinese state-owned banks. whilst all the rest of the economy has opened up and having to defend for themselves in a global competition, the Chinese banks have pretty much been shielded away from it.
Right.
And now there's another reason why, is that the state-owned enterprises now are the ones which are the sort of pretty much the weakest and need to be reformed, need to be restructured. And if you want to restructure the state-owned enterprises, you have to restructure the financial systems. And also the RMB becoming global, that's another ambition, goal the President Xi has.
Professor Qing Wang, I'm afraid we are running out of time. It's a great discussion. We're going to have to pick this up again in the future. But Professor Qing Wang of Warwick University in the UK and, of course, Craig Copetas in Paris, thank you both very much indeed.